Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who have joined us. My name is Johnson Kang with Cloudian, and I'll be your host for the webinar today. Joining me today are Mark Pastor, Quantum's Director of Archive Solutions, and also Amit Rolwani, Cloudian's Director of Technology Alliances and Solutions.
Thank you very much, Johnson. Welcome, everybody. I'm looking at the poll results right now, and I can see, number one, there's about 40% of you are not sure about whether or not you're purging data rarely to utilize primary storage more effectively, and about 40% of you know that you are doing that. And so I think this session will be very valuable for you, and for those that aren't necessarily doing that right now, I think you'll get some tidbits on how you might actually be able to manage your data more effectively. So with that said, okay, and then the second result here, let me take a look at this. I'm seeing these, okay, so 60 to 80%. All right, this is great. So what we're seeing here is, for those people that understand, active data versus less active data, a good percentage of you, 60 to 80% of you, feel that 50% of your data is infrequently accessed, and that's very consistent with certainly what we hear from a lot of the industry and our customers. And so recognizing that there's data that is immediately being utilized for what we call the active workflow right now means that it needs to be in a place that supports the performance required for that active workflow. But if data becomes less frequently needed, there's many intelligent things you can do with that. And I think you'll see today both from how Quantum can help you manage the placement of that data and how Cloudian can do the same and be a very valid target for where you retain that data over the long term. I think you get some great information from this webinar. So thank you very much, everybody. Amit, I'll say hello to Amit from Cloudian, just so you can hear his voice. Hello, Amit.
Hello, Mark, and hello, everybody on the call. You will definitely hear from me a lot more at the later part of the call. And Mark, over to you. I'm going to advance slides as we go. Okay?
Thanks very much, Amit. All right, yeah. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about Quantum and our solution up front, and then Amit will follow up with some of the Cloudian piece and how the two work together. So just so you know, many of you may be familiar with Quantum, but we're a company that's been around for many years, founded in 1980. We've got a very large number of customers. We're spanned globally across over 200 countries. We're about $500 million in revenue and about 1,000 employees. One of the things that is a key focus of our specialization these days is we have a tremendous presence in managing rich data in a lot of the environments that you see listed at the bottom of the screen here, government, geospatial, life sciences, et cetera. I refer to these as technical workflows in many cases. Certainly, we're a leader in media and entertainment environments with our StorNext technology, which I'll talk about momentarily. So we've built a lot of strength and capability in managing very rich data throughout its life. And I think that's, fits kind of what we're trying to talk about here in terms of maximizing the value of that data and that content. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, end-to-end solution. And so one of the things that we see is very, very common across all of those industries that we serve that I talked about is that data really is kind of the product of those companies. So the research or the media content, it's really the crown jewels of the company. And so it's got very high value. And so what we want to do is make sure you've got good tools to retain that extremely valuable data or content over its life, but do it in the most cost-effective way, because cost is also an important element of your operations. There's a lot of common themes in what that data looks like. It's largely unstructured data, typically, and particularly in today's environment. What we're seeing is just about all of those industries are experiencing extremely rapid growth. Either because CPUs and processing power is getting very, is continuing to grow and becoming very extreme in its processing capabilities. The whole introduction of intelligence, into every industry, is creating a lot more utilization of data. It's getting deeper, it's getting richer. And the same thing for anything where there's sensors and recording going on, where the resolutions of all these devices are becoming higher and higher. So data is growing. Everybody knows it. That's not that's nothing new to anybody here. And of course, so meeting the needs of performance, managing the security of your data, managing the accessibility of the data is very, very important. And so we'll talk about the solutions that do that. Next slide. All right, so finally, now getting into a little bit of the storage technology side. So one of the things about Quantum, and you see kind of laid out across this workflow here, is we're kind of introducing what is more of a media type of a workflow, where you start, many workflows begin with some sort of an ingest process, then there becomes some sort of an editing process, and that could be an analysis process if you're in a research environment, editorial, finishing, transcoding. Those are all things that they make sense in a media environment, but research environments have counterparts to that have similar demands and sometimes greater demands in terms of processing and data access. And then, of course, there's the distribution of the data, there's the long-term retention of the data, and there's making sure that the data is well protected and highly durable. And so across the slide on the bottom here, we talk about the various types of technologies. So first of all, Quantum has what we call Excelus, which is an appliance, and it includes StorNext software, and StorNext is kind of the heart of our file system that has integrated tiering. And so tiering is a very important part of how you manage data from the very high performance front end of the workflow all the way back to the long-term archive of the workflow. So StorNext is kind of like the data manager and the high performance file system, and it's able to reach out and touch all these other technologies that you see listed on the back end. So object storage, what we refer to as AEL archives, which is tape libraries. LTFS is a very popular format for tape for long-term retention or protection as well. And of course, public clouds, are absolutely continuing to experience growth and appeal for various reasons, for many of you. And so your data can be managed, in a hybrid environment as well. So if you have these appliances on premise, you can present, what StorNext does is it presents a federated single file namespace to the users and the applications, regardless of where the files are actually living. So sometimes they may be living in a public cloud, sometimes they may be living in a cold archive, sometimes they're right there on high performance storage, and it's policies that will dictate where the files reside based on your use of that media and the policies that you set. So that's kind of the magic and the secret sauce of how all this stuff works together. Next slide. Okay, so as I kind of suggested, there's going to be different requirements for the data and the content based on where it is in its life. So typically at the very front end, both for ingest or for the high performance analysis or the editing work, you need extreme performance. And we have many customers who have multiple workflows on the same data. And so you see we have continuous accessibility. And accessibility to us means the data is there when you need it, but it's also there for who needs it. And so I'll talk a moment about how the StorNext platform actually provides multi-user access to the same data via multiple protocols, and we manage file locking and all that. So as your workflows split out, you have somebody that might be working on sound, or you've got somebody that might be working on a particular research component of your data, and somebody else is doing something else. The data continues to be broadly available to all users in the environment, and the files are managed accordingly to provide that. And of course, as I talked about data growth earlier, one of the things that's obviously key, and I'd love to understand this audience, but everybody seems to be experiencing petabyte scale data growth these days. And so as you move into the hundreds of terabytes or the petabyte type of scale, you're going to need cost-effective capacity, and it depends on whether that's going to be active data or cold data. You'll absolutely appreciate the values of Cloudian object storage for a piece of that retention of those petabytes of data. If you've got some colder storage, you might look at tape technology for your long-term retention over many years. And all of that has to continue to include data protection and all that. So these are the key considerations for a scale-out portfolio in all these types of workflows that we're talking about. Next slide. All right, so I introduced Excelus. So this is our appliance platform. It is media industry's leading shared storage appliance. Shared storage being an important piece of that I mentioned. We absolutely can demonstrate performance leadership. And so I think the key takeaway from this slide really is what you want when you have these data, rich data environments is you need something at the front end that's going to deliver the performance that you need. It's going to deliver the data accessibility that you need, but you also want to simplify how that data can be managed over its lifetime. And so you can always buy high performance storage. Now I'll argue that the Excelus appliance will outperform most high performance storage that you'll see out there, or it can meet whatever performance requirements you need. But what is missing in most of the platforms out there is how do I get that data in a seamless way so that my users don't have to worry about it and think about it? How do I get that data from the performance platform when it's ready to be moved off to something else, whether that be object storage, public cloud, tape storage, whatever. And so you want the performance at the front end, and you want the integration of all the other tiers to be seamless and easy. And that's really the key and the magic of the Excelus storage with StorNext software, running the show behind the scenes. So I think that's really the key points here. Next slide. So just to give you a couple more slides, to graphically show what we're talking about. So here we talk about comprehensive SAN and NAS access. So if you remember, I talked about environments might have different portions of the workflow. Somebody might be working on sound, somebody else might be working on color, somebody else might be, doing tagging of ingested data. Somebody might be doing high performance HPC analysis on the data. Those things can happen concurrently because the data is sitting in a way that it's being presented to all of these different environments. And it doesn't matter if they're connected via NFS or SMB or block storage over SAN or other IP protocols that we have. All of the data can be viewed, seen, and accessed as desired in all of these groups concurrently. And we have file locking and all that manages, the access and the management of each file during the life of those different steps. So that's an important consideration when you federate all of this namespace, make it available to everybody. Do you have it set up in a way that can manage the access and utilization of each file? And so the answer is yes, the StorNext. Next slide. And then finally, in addition to what we talked about is IP protocol, SAN and NAS protocol on the previous slide, you see here, and this is fairly recent introduction for Excelus, is we now also have an S3 front end. So a lot of people are beginning to migrate their applications or adopting applications that prefer to speak in an S3 object-oriented way. And so Excelus can also present an S3 front end so that those applications can speak to Excelus as well. And what you see at the below the appliance there is you see tape, you see object storage, you see public cloud. And so those are the tiers that can sit behind Excelus that are the secondary tiers that you will leverage for your data protection, for your long-term retention, for your data sharing, et cetera. So very, very comprehensive front end, gives you the performance you need, gives you all the access you need, tiers to all the appropriate storage layers that you need. And we're here partnering with Cloudian because they've got a very capable, industry-leading solution in their object storage platform that Amit will be talking about in just a moment. And so we're delighted to be collaborating with Cloudian in putting together a totally comprehensive system that combines Quantum StorNext with their object storage and any of the other back-end pieces, potentially tape, that we can also provide to that equation. So between the two of us, we can offer the total solution. And I think that leads to you, Amit, is that right?
There's one more slide.
Yeah, so, almost, yeah, sorry. So I think you get the gist of this. This really basically just restates everything that we just talked about. You've got your various tiers of storage. You've got online, you've got performance, you've got nearline, and you've even got offline in many cases. And so we think, Cloudian can play an important piece, of that storage where you see them placed here in the online archive. With other people, sometimes people refer to that as active archive, but it's a very important secondary storage piece where you might have, fairly active data, but you don't want to consume your performance tier. And as you saw from the polls, a lot of you recognize that. You want to move data off your performance tier. It's the most expensive, but you still want your data to be highly accessible. So I think that's a great role for Cloudian. Yep, go ahead, Amit.
That was great, Mark. Thanks a lot for introducing the solution. It goes squarely to the poll questions and kind of validated based on the responses we got on one of the issues with storage systems these days seems to be that there's not enough storage, and the storage that is being utilized is not in the most efficient manner. So before I get a little more into the solution that we're going to present more on and how Cloudian fits in with Quantum StorNext to address some of these problems, I definitely wanted to introduce Cloudian to the audience here. We are a startup that was launched in 2011, and the sole purpose of the startup was to form a storage product based on the object storage technology, which was relatively new at the time. The tenet of the company was to kind of create this capacity layer storage, which was built on the S3 protocol, which again was new at that time. Over the years, that we've seen that S3 has become a very, very powerful tool for storage needs for a lot of the companies, and a lot of applications have been built using the S3 protocol. And based on how the S3 protocol was the design tenet of the company, we are proud to be one of the most compliant S3 storage out there in the marketplace today. A little more on the company specifically. We are a global company with headquarters we have a split headquarters, which is kind of interesting. We have our headquarters out here in the Silicon Valley, and we also have a partial headquarters in Japan. We are expanding rapidly and recently announced a pretty big funding round of $94 million in late August, and we have more than 240 active customers that use Cloudian, and our key partners that also resell us in some cases range from Lenovo, Cisco, HP, Amazon, and Google. So what does the product look like? So our marquee product is the Cloudian HyperStore. It is an on-premises S3 compatible object store that gives you unlimited scalability. Some of the highlights of this product are that customers are able to start small with this. So the capacity that HyperStore provides you can get started as low as in the 50 to 100 terabyte range and scale all the way up to hundreds of petabytes. This product is ideal in the hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environment because it works on premises as well as tiers automatically to the public cloud layer. Some of the use cases that we've seen as being right in our alley range from the media entertainment space, storage as a service, backup archive, Internet of Things, and so on. Deployment options that HyperStore provides range from the appliance model, where we have a 1U and a 4U option that can give you a dense storage capacity within the appliance itself, and that can scale in a scale-out manner. But we also provide a software-only option for our storage stack. These can work on industry standard hardware coming from the likes of the Cisco's of the world, HP, and so on. And we also have options in the AWS marketplace. The product provides integrated data protection, and the data protection ranges from replication options, where you can get a factor of 2 or 3 replication for data protection, and also erasure coding. From an erasure coding perspective, we support multiple erasure coding schemes and offer flexible and economical options, where you can start with as low as a 4+2 erasure coding model, and depending on your setup, have various different options available to you. The product offers integrated data search, where every object is stored with associated metadata that can be customized and searched and used for analytics purpose. Integration with Elasticsearch and Kibana gives you the capability for seamless searching and visualization of the objects within the system itself. And then finally, we do support multi-site deployment in a distributed model, and it also enables us to provide hybrid multi-cloud support to our customers. So what are the challenges that we are trying to address with the solution today, and what we're trying to talk about in this webinar? As the poll question suggested, that a lot of the enterprises are aware that it's the data economy, and data is the new oil. Everybody is looking to utilize this new resource to monetize their data and get new business models going with the data that they're storing. The challenges obviously are that there's an explosion in the amount of data that's been created in the past decade itself, and we've all seen the statistics on how every year there's a doubling of data that's happening, and enterprises are struggling on the most efficient manner on how to capture, store, and analyze this data. The interesting aspect of all of this is that the biggest explosion of data is in the unstructured data space, and being able to store this unstructured data, which is usually comes in big formats, is a challenge. We've also seen from various industry analysts and also from our poll question that 60% of the data that's actually being generated is usually not the data that gets accessed most frequently. In terms of data access, I would even go as far as saying that about 80% of the data is infrequently accessed, whereas 20% of the data is usually considered live and needs high performance. So management of all of this data and storage of all of this data in an efficient manner becomes a challenge for a lot of the IT admin, which leads to purging of the data. Another challenge that most of the organizations are facing is there's just so many options in where the data gets stored. There's on-premises option, then there's public cloud, and for larger enterprises, there's also the aspect of being able to work with the multiple data centers that different branches of the organization bring into play. What we're trying to address here is to be able to help organizations economically and in an efficient manner store all of the data that they're producing in the right manner, so that they can have visibility across various different tiers of data, as well as being able to access the data as per requirement. Touching on the solution that we've put together with Quantum. Now, Quantum opened up their StorNext platform on the Flex tier, where Cloudian is now a certified solution. based on the S3 compliance. And now what that gives you is the capability of storing your data in various tiers in a cost-effective manner. So the primary storage tier is the Excelus platform that gives you the performance for live data, which needs to be accessed in a very, very quick manner. StorNext platform gives you the capability of defining policies and automatically tier the data as it gets to a stage where it can be moved to a more capacity tier, so to speak. It identifies the inactive data and transparently moves it to a Cloudian HyperStore, which forms the scalable capacity storage in this solution. There is no disruption to the application workflow because the tiering actually happens in the background. And there is also no changes required to the application layer because the data is moved transparently and the access to the data stays as it was prior to the tiering without an issue. There's also the aspect of cold storage, where if there's data that needs to be stored but not necessarily accessed till there is an absolute need for it, to tier this kind of data to tape archives, which also is something that's compliant with our S3 APIs. So what are the use cases that this opens up? So storage tiering is something that we just talked about. It's the most basic use case that we're talking about, and it applies to any industry and every industry. In this case, the primary storage options include SAN, NAS, and so on. And based on policies of access, it could also be age of data and so on and so forth. This data can be tiered seamlessly onto Cloudian and also further on to tape or cloud. Some of the important wins we've seen in this area have also come from the media and entertainment space. Quantum is pretty big in the media entertainment space, and Cloudian also has some of our biggest customers using us in the same space. Media files can get pretty big. We're talking about 4K, 8K videos, and so on. And not all of these files are accessed all of the time immediately with immediate access. When a project is live, there are a lot of players in this space which are accessing the data, accessing videos for editing purposes, and so on and so forth. And then you have the capacity layer where these videos can actually be stored with metadata tagging so that they can be searched and retrieved whenever they're required, but not necessarily giving the immediate performance that the primary storage gives. So policy-driven automated storage tiering to Cloudian for archival and on-demand workloads is a use case that the media industry seems to be liking with this solution. Similarly, scalable storage for video surveillance is a newer use case that we are seeing with this solution. Similar to what you have in the media space, the video surveillance industry has a lot of unstructured data in form of video archives that they need to store and retain for regulatory purposes, and having a capacity layer is a big advantage and a cost saving for them. Some of the customer successes we've already had with this solution include, well, I'm picking up a specific example here of a large European university, which had the requirement of spreading the data across 3 of their sites. This is a pretty big campus that's geographically spread, and having different departments across various cities within a European country was the requirement. The solution here required file access to the data for immediate purposes, but as they also required that the data be stored in a low cost capacity tier where they can also access the data directly from the object side. This was research data. This was huge imaging data and so on and so forth that needed cost-effective storage. And they also wanted to store older data on a even more cost-effective manner on tape. So as you can see, the solution here includes a 3-site deployment of Cloudian with StorNext and doing a cross-region replication to another site which acts as a DR and has tape backup with the quantum tapes. And this is a live solution that we have in this region. And finally, wanted to leave you guys with the slide on why customers choose Cloudian. So if I want to leave behind something with you guys, it is that we are 100% S3 API compliant object store. With Cloudian HyperStore, you can start small and grow as much as you require. Worm capability is not something that we talked about today, but we are worm compliant, and worm means write once and read many times. This is very important for compliance purposes, and it's becoming key in use cases like ransomware protection and so on and so forth. Interoperability with public cloud, data protection that can come in various different formats, as well as data durability with 14.9 availability. And finally, we have cloud-like costing for HyperStore with ½ cent per gigabyte per month, which makes it a very attractive option. And with that, I've come to the end of my presentation.
And if you have any additional questions for our presenters, please feel free to send it to resources@cloudian.com. And we'll be happy to answer those. So, well, thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, audience. Thanks, Cloudian. Yep. Bye-bye.